Hi, we're going to talk about lipids and carbohydrates right now, these two macromolecules specifically. So let's just dive right into it, get some quick overview of each. Now, lipids have a chemical makeup of just using carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Of course, carbon's in there like all of our other macromolecules as well. Now, the monomers of our lipids are glycerol and fatty acids. Now, the glycerol and the fatty acid, they come together to create these long chains. You can see here in our diagram here. This is our glycerol here, and here are our fatty acids. Now this is actually this entire thing here is actually what's known as a triglyceride. And we can see tri meaning three, and we have three chains of fatty acids. Now these chains can extend for different amounts, okay, different lengths, but this is kind of just a rough general viewpoint of a lipid here. Now, lipids, we've heard, you can see saturated and unsaturated. You might have heard that when talking about food, saturated fat and unsaturated fat. And what it comes down to is what makes something saturated and unsaturated is this right here. That double bond, which is shown by two lines there, causes a kink in the chemical structure of that fatty acid. And because of that, if you compare it to the saturated fatty acid up there, you'll see that there's a hydrogen for every carbon. It's just totally surrounding every carbon. Right? It is saturated with hydrogens. If you look down below, back again at the unsaturated, you can see that those two carbons that are around that have that double bond there, they're missing a hydrogen here and here, so they're not as saturated. So all the carbons are not saturated. That's what gives it the unsaturated name. And then again, we have our triglyceride molecule down there in the bottom right, just like the picture above. Now the functions of lipids vary. They go from waterproofing that we see in waxes, in plants, and in animals as well. So that waterproofing covering that we have on the top of the leaf there, again, that's that waterproofing waxy covering. You might have been able to feel it before if you've ever picked up a leaf and thought, wow, this is kind of hard, it's kind of, you got that sheen to it. That's that waxy waterproofing going on right there. We also use lipids to make our phospholipid bilayer. And they have the hydrophilic heads and the hydrophobic tails. So again, philic and phobic. Philic as a love of and phobic as a fear of. And so the phobic is going to push away that water, and we have a phospholipid bilayer. We have two layers going on here, one, two, right? And that surrounds, it goes all the way around, and it creates our cell membrane. And so that's going to keep water inside and outside from moving too much. Now, we're going to get into how water moves to and out of the cell in another session here. Also, there's steroids, so hormones such as testosterone, that is made with lipids as well, and then cholesterol. Again, that might be something that you remember hearing about with nutrition, and you don't want too much cholesterol. And what happens with the cholesterol, if you look at our diagram here, is you get that buildup of that plaque, that lipid deposited plaque down there. And so that's going to limit the blood flow. Then you have too much cholesterol, and you have that limit of blood flow, especially around the heart. That's when people start getting heart attacks and stuff like that. There's also the long-term energy storage, right? And that's with our fat cells. So when our body has extra energy that it has taken in from what we have eaten, and it's not being used, the body can turn that into fat cells and store that for long term. All right, so now let's talk about carbs. And I have down here saccharides. All right, so we have different types of saccharides that we're going to see here. Now, the monomers of carbohydrates, we'll call a saccharide. And saccharide is kind of a fancy word for a sugar molecule. Now, we also have polysaccharides, and that's the polymers of our carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates appear, again, in carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen combinations, but in a almost one-to-one. For the most part, it's usually one-to-one. And we can see that in the glucose molecule there, where it's C6H12O6. So for every one carbon, there are 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Now, we use carbohydrates. We use these saccharides in a variety of ways in both plant and animals. So plants, we're going to see it in starches and cellulose. Right? So the cellulose is going to make up that cell wall, and the starch is kind of that energy storage for plants. And then glycogen is a energy storage for animals here. We're going to see in the next slide here. So again, structurally, carbohydrates used for cell walls. But here's our quick energy needs, right? Carbohydrates, quick energy. Where lipids, we could use that for the long term. So if we need it right away, if you're an animal, you're going to store, the main energy storage is going to be as known as glycogen. And then starch, it's going to be stored in as plants, it's going to be stored in as starch. And so when a plant goes through photosynthesis and it creates carbohydrates through photosynthesis, it's going to store those carbohydrates in the form of starch. And then we can eat starch through potatoes and pasta and grains, rices, stuff like that. All right, that's it. Just a real quick overview of our notes on carbohydrates and lipids. See you guys in class.